Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 150. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Station. Dave, we have a couple of champions. We have the New York Knicks and the Carolina Hurricanes, who won their respective trophies this weekend. Some really exciting stuff there. Sorry to your Vegas Golden Knights for falling short in the Stanley Cup Finals this year. So, got a pretty, maybe shorter show today. Have a live stream tonight for you guys to bring some more Steelers content, but obviously hitting the slow season of the offseason. And should note here and appreciate the reader or two that brought it to my attention. I've made a mistake the last several episodes with the introduction. I had the episode count wrong. We're not on episode 199 or 200. We're on 150. You've not missed any episodes. In classic Alex fashion, I do write down the episode number before each show and just kind of a quick synopsis of things and topics to talk about. And I wrote down what was supposed to be a 4. I read it as a 9 for those who know my training camp notes. Sometimes they get a little sloppy and messy and I can't read my own writing. And so when I wrote down and said 190 one time, I thought it was 9 going forward. And so back on track, it is 150. Dave, how you doing?
All right, happy Monday. And you said my Vegas Golden Knights. So obviously, yeah, I live in Vegas, and but the Penguins are my team. Now, once the Penguins obviously get out of it, if Vegas is still around, I'll root for them. But as I mentioned, I think several episodes ago, John Tortorella, man, that's a hard guy, at least based on his history, to root for. So I was kind of soft rooting, I guess, for Vegas, more so for the team other than Tortorella. And God, I hope they don't bring him back now. That series started off pretty good, but kind of weighing there. They really got outworked and outplayed by Carolina. And Jordan Stahl, good for him. Stanley Cup champion again, and Conn Smythe winner. He's an easy guy to root for. So the fact that Carolina won and mostly centered around Jordan Stahl, I was okay with that. I did pay attention to a couple of the fourth quarters in the NBA series, but I was kind of indifferent overall, I guess, to that. You know how you can tell it's summer now, Alex?
How's that?
The Pirates can't win a series right now, and Hakeem Butler is back in the NFL again.
Signed by Denver today, so the spring MVP of MVPs is back in the NFL.
Exactly. And I think we caught everybody up. Yeah, the NBA, NHL wrapped up now at this point. I thought the USA's watched the World Cup, first World Cup game for them a couple days ago. That was exciting. We'll see what they can do moving forward. And as people now realize, the Steelers offseason program has now wrapped up. I think they do have kind of that rookie school, probably more classroom stuff than anything that I think Mike McCarthy talked about going on this week. And we're hitting that long break of nearly 6 weeks until training camp starts. I think I plan on starting my 90 and 30 series next Monday, so I'm starting to right ahead for that. And obviously no roster moves to talk about, I don't think, since we last left on Friday, but I think we got a few topics to talk about today.
There is one contract situation. Friday, Dave, you and I talked about Aaron Brewer, the Dolphins, getting a big money extension, how that may impact Zach Frazier's future contract value. He's not eligible for an extension this year, but I think will be a hot topic come 2027. Mason McCormick will be in a similar boat, due for an extension in 2027, will be worthy of it if his play continues on the path and track it's on right now. And Monday, the New York Jets signed offensive guard Joe Tippmann to a 4-year deal worth over $16 million per season, and it probably has some sort of future application to Mason McCormick's future value.
Yeah, Ian Rappaport came out about an hour ago and says the Jets and guard Joe Tippmann have agreed on a 4-year, $16.4 million extension with $34.9 million guaranteed in a deal negotiated by his representation over at Athletes First. So we don't have any more specifics other than that. I don't know. I think that was slightly the total was slightly more than one of the I think Zach who was it, Blattman, I think, who wanted to beat. I think we even had him on the podcast last year or last time the Steelers played the Jets and all. So I would imagine there might be some up to language in that. I don't know, roster bonuses or something like that. But Ian Rappaport says $66.4 million extension, at least total that we're working with. And what's that? What's 66.4 divided by 4? That would be 16.6 million APY if we were to take that for what it's at least originally reported with. We don't know about the guarantees. I think he said full guarantees, but we'll see if that's fully guaranteed with the amount that Ian Rappaport has listed at 34.9. Maybe some of that's injury guaranteed. All that will work its way out in the wash over the course of this week before the real details of that surface. So back to why we're talking about that. To me, and look, we're still a year out thereabouts from Mason McCormick and Zach Frazier signing deals. They have to get through the 2026 season first and foremost. One would imagine if both those guys stay healthy and have the kind of seasons people expect them to have, that those will be the two prime contract extension candidates for the Steelers. Once again, next offseason there. I guess the biggest thing, what happens to this guard market moving forward from this point? A lot of stuff can obviously happen between now and when the Steelers would actually potentially maybe get Mason McCormick signed to a new deal. Tippmann, I think a former first round draft pick, wasn't he?
Might have been second.
Was it second?
I'll double check here.
Yeah.
A high pick though.
Yeah, high pick. I think originally maybe thought of being a center coming to the NFL. I think it really behooved him to make the move to guard specifically last year, I think, with the Jets there. I think the big takeaway here is that's likely to at least be a floor, a potential floor, I think, for Mason McCormick a year from now. Now, once again, a lot can and might happen between now and what we go into next offseason talking about Mason McCormick and his potential contract value. But whenever you get big deals like this, a year ahead, specifically when you've got the kind of the notion of the Steelers player at the same position, maybe getting a contract extension a year out. It's important to kind of look at these things. I mean, obviously, more than a year from now, the whole free agent signings will be complete. We'll see how many guards are potentially included in that and all. But at a minimum, it feels like this is a good floor to work with, around $16.5 million when it comes to Mason McCormick. That could potentially be 20 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. Time will tell. Mason McCormick needs to stay healthy once again and have a great season. But I think the giant takeaway there is that could be a potential floor for Mason McCormick.
I agree. And it was just a couple of years ago that Pittsburgh paid Isaac Seumalo 3 years, $24 million for a plug-and-play veteran, accomplished and respected guard. And the guard market has really shifted in recent years, well before Tippmann, guys like Robert Hunt and Kevin Dotson. I always forget some of the names who've gotten paid, maybe Austin Corbett as well. I can't quite remember the entire list top of my head, but the market's certainly come up approaching and about $20 million per year for the real high-end guys. Where will McCormick ultimately slot in? Obviously, his performance in 2026 will matter and have an impact. Could he make a Pro Bowl? Will be tough to do, but his play's certainly been on the rise. And as I mentioned before, kind of quietly just gone about his work, because Frazier gets a lot of attention for the Steelers' history as centers and just being the pivot and his relationship with Aaron Rodgers, how key that was last year. Young center and a veteran quarterback, new system. You have offensive tackle and Troy Fautanu, the shiny first-round picks. Now you had Maxi Honachor in that. McCormick sort of gets lost in that shuffle, but I think his play was steady last year. I thought he got better both in run blocking and pass protection. No major weakness in any area. Really durable, really technical. Has seamlessly, played that right guard spot. Now likely to flip back to left guard as college home. We'll see if that helps his development even more. So, yeah, I think floor is probably that number, assuming McCormick has a typical McCormick season with anything better than that, potentially approaching, $20 million.
Agreed. And funny that you mentioned Kevin Dotson pulled up his contract here. I think he signed that deal. When did he sign that
A couple
deal?
years ago.
Yeah, 2024, I think. March 7th, 2024. And his APY currently is 16 million. So it seems like Tippmann has come in a little higher than that. And once again, I mean, you're talking by the time we get to maybe serious talks about McCormick, that Kevin Dotson deal will be three years old at that point. So once again, don't write anything in stone. It does at least kind of feel like that at least a starting point with Mason McCormick could potentially be similar to, if not slightly higher than what Tippmann is getting from the Jets, and we'll wait to see what the T's and the I's all look like on the final contract with him. And then we still got 5.5, 6 weeks to go until training camp goes. I think roughly about 90 days before the regular season starts. How many more guards will jump on that list of new contracts? How many centers will? That's something else we'll be watching for when it comes to a guy like Zach Frazier as well too. So that's kind of the most peripheral kind of Steelers related topic, I guess, to cover, or that we have covered now on this Monday show.
And I'm realizing, just looking at the site, trying to find comparables, we talked about how Over the Cap, which is a tremendous resource, no disrespect to them, they had Herbeck at inside linebacker. They also have Fautanu at left guard. So I wonder if they just take college projections and what NFL draft projections are and never really update those, because Fautanu definitely a tackle, and that's going to be important to reflect the tackle market whenever he gets paid. That may be 2 years out, fifth-year option exercise next year. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, a lot more next offseason, but another name to watch. I mentioned it before. I'll be a broken record, say it again, especially because it's sort of slow right now. Next offseason, of course, quarterback will be talked about plenty, as it always is, but the offensive line and who to pay and decisions and who walks and who gets retained and who gets extended, that's going to be the primary topic. We talk about Frazier and McCormick and the option on Fautanu and do the extension this next offseason or wait. You talk about Broderick Jones, anything on him. Dylan Cook, an RFA, Spencer Anderson, a pending free agent, Brock Hoffman, 1-year contract. There was so much offensive line talk to be had next offseason. It's a good problem to have, a lot of good options. I think Pittsburgh's in a very good place, totally rebuilt this offensive line. Kudos to Khan and Weidel and the whole front office for making that effort, but offensive line is going to be the focus next offseason.
Yeah, and funny you mentioned Broderick Jones within that. We've already had a kind of a mini conversation about, obviously, we've been tracking his health as best as we can throughout the offseason program. It doesn't sound like he did too terribly much. I guess more the positive aspect with him is he was able to do some things, and now we sit and wait for the start of training camp, 5.5, 6 weeks away, to see whether or not he starts off training camp on the active PUP. And if indeed he does do that, then all eyes will be on how does he stay on active PUP all throughout the rest of the offseason, and will he start the regular season on reserve PUP. And if indeed there's a lot of ifs there, but we did mention that, in the event that Broderick Jones is unable to play and spends the entire 2026 season on reserve PUP, his contract would then toll, and he would not become an unrestricted free agent next offseason. So you could get him, in other words, we'll have we'll have more definitive outlook, I think, on Broderick Jones' situation come really day one of training camp, of whether or not he's out there practicing and whether or not he's on active PUP. And then even once he is on active PUP, he could be activated from that list at any point moving forward. But once he does get activated, or if he does get activated from the active PUP list, he cannot go back on the PUP list at that time as well too. So could we end up end up having discussions about Broderick Jones contract tolling this same time next year? That's 365 days, and they might pass faster than some people might realize, but we'll get a more clearer kind of picture on him definitely come the start of training camp of who and all maybe starts off training camp on the PUP list.
To get in the weeds, which is par for the course for you and I, would that decision get made July 28th when the team reports, or 29th when they begin their first practice?
I think the transaction obviously has to be made. I would think on this. Man, I don't.
It'd probably the 29th, just made
Yeah,
before the team begins practicing, I think,
right,
right?
right. It would have to be, I think, before they actually hit the field the first time.
Right. Now, I know McCarthy will probably speak to reporters on the 28th, and I'm sure would be asked about anyone going on PUP and any injury situation and the health of Broderick Jones, and so he may reveal it then. Mike Tomlin at least often did. He was pretty transparent about that. So that'll be one storyline to watch for, certainly right around report date and the first practice time.
Yeah, and look, I mean, he officially has to be. Any player needs to officially be on PUP before the first practice, because if those players are not, on PUP, they are considered, ready to practice, and then thus can't go on PUP moving forward from that point. So a lot of people confuse the PUP situation that once, say a player gets out there day one of training camp and gets injured, a lot of people still under the assumption that, well, he could just go to PUP for the rest of the off season. That's not how it works. Once you practice once in training camp, you are no longer eligible for PUP. Then you're kind of looking at potential of maybe an IR situation with that player.
To stay in the weeds, if he doesn't get put on PUP the first practice, just hypothetically, but he doesn't actually practice, he's just sidelines in sweats, nothing at all remotely related to practice, could he still get placed on reserve or active PUP?
I don't believe so, Alex.
Okay.
I'll have to double check on that. I think that technically at the start of training camp before the first practice, players have to be. I'll have to double check on that, but my understanding, at least, and that's dangerous, is that he needs to be listed on active PUP before the first practice,
Okay.
he whether or not he actually gets out on the field and does anything or not.
Now, it's likely the team will make that decision immediately because they're going to know his health. He's probably going to have a doctor visit right before training camp to get a check-in and where he's at health-wise and kind of make a decision for his training camp status going forward. So it's doubtful they would even need extra time to take a day into training camp and still make that decision. But just giving the hypothetical, given that it's a slow time of year, and to discuss it now as opposed to later when things will be much busier right around the 28th.
And heck, for all we know, he might be on track for what they want him to do, and he might be ready to go at the start of training camp, and thus, avoid PUP altogether.
Right, and he was in a helmet and doing individual drills and having at least some contact with the blocking sled, which is positive for a neck injury. Still not the same level as actual contact with opponents and defensive linemen, but it seemed like a positive sign that would tell me that he's got a good chance to avoid active PUP to begin training camp. He may not be a full participant immediately, but that's kind of my inclination. But we'll have to see. Probably some more, like I said, doctor visits along the way, and team make that decision when the time comes.
All right. These 6 weeks will pass fairly quickly, and we'll be watching for that come reporting day.
Dave, we gotten, I think, an email or maybe something on Twitter about Brandon Aiyuk and talking about his situation, updating his situation. He remains a San Francisco 49er, although it's obviously a very tension-filled situation between both sides. The 49ers not wanting to release Aiyuk, hoping to trade him. It seems like Washington is a likely landing spot for Aiyuk. Aiyuk's been active on social media expressing his displeasure about the situation, and it's been just a lot going on with Brandon Aiyuk. So the story that was the story 2 off seasons ago, we don't want to spend too much time on it, but somebody did ask us to kind of give our thoughts on his situation.
Yeah, interesting that we get asked that. And look, I guess I understand it in totality, but how much actual airtime over the last couple of seasons do you think we have down on tape on talking about Ayuk? 3
Oh God,
hours?
I'd say more than that, to be honest with you.
In
That 24
actual
off season was crazy.
yeah, and on the surface, it obviously looks like the Steelers dodged a huge bullet. I mean, how close was that trade from actually happening? I mean, it feels like it was if you go back to what Shanahan had to say and Lynch, and it feels like that was very very close to happening. And obviously, Ayuk suffered the injury, and then man, he's become quite the character ever since then, and I don't think has obviously played it down since he was injured. The 49ers kind of have him on a string right now. Ayuk obviously isn't happy about that. So if people want us to briefly talk about Ayuk here, and I imagine most don't, but let's quickly discuss it here. Ayuk, according to Over the Cap, is due a minimum base salary in 2026 of 1.215 million there. Now, however, he is under contract through 2030. However, the final 2 years, 2029 and 2030, are void years. He is due on September 1st an option bonus this summer of 24.935 million. So either that's going to be picked up and prorated, or either that's going to be picked up and not prorated and paid out by the 40. Now it's not guaranteed. I don't think it's has any guarantees attached to it, because obviously all of his guarantees have been wiped anyway due to, I guess, what conduct detrimental, whatever.
I think he skipped his rehab,
Mhm.
and so the 49ers voided his guaranteed
Right.
money on that.
So if any team were to trade for Ayuk before September 1st, they would be on the hook for the base salary, and then they would be on the hook for the nearly $25 million option bonus, and have to make a decision. Do they want to pay that all in 2026, or do they want to prorate it out? Much kind of similar to the situation that the Steelers have with Jalen Ramsey later this summer here. I will tell you this flat out. If I'm an NFL team, there's no way I have any interest in Brandon Ayuk, especially with that nearly $25 million option bonus floating around out there. Uh, no, there's nothing anybody could do right now to convince me as a general manager to take a risk on that at this point. And never say never. Stranger things have happened, but right now, I'd be surprised if any team trades for him. It certainly should not be the Steelers. The only way I would kind of maybe get on board for the Steelers doing something here is if Brandon Ayuk ended up being cut outright, and you could get him for on a 1 year right at minimum or damn near close to minimum contract. I want him to have his play. I want him playing for his NFL future in 2026. If I'm the Steelers, I want a very, 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 very low risk type situation with him, especially with kind of the attitude shift, and the coming off of the injury and all like that. So I guess, long story short, that's why we haven't been talking about him in quite some time, because it does not seem plausible, probable, however you want to frame it, when it comes to Brandon Ayuk at this point having a future with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, if he were cut out, cut outright, and if he did want to play for the minimum or damn near close to it, and specifically wanted to come to Pittsburgh to do it, I would be apt at potentially looking at that. But look, you're not going to get anything out of him on special teams. You obviously have your top two wide receivers in DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr. You've got a rookie that you're going to try to get involved in, Jeremy Bernard. We'll see what happens with Roman Wilson. There feels like there's no room at the end anyway when it comes to a guy like Brandon Aiyuk. But yeah, that's kind of why I think we haven't been talking about him, and specifically that I don't think anything's going to happen with Brandon Aiyuk unless I'm reading his contract wrong, which I don't think I am here, until he's cut. Because once again, if you trade for him and you do so before September 1st, you're going to have to that option bonus comes into play with him, and I can't imagine the 49ers wanting to eat that, and it's just hard to imagine any team being interested in giving Brandon Aiyuk an additional $25 million for what could, essentially be one season, I guess, if things don't work out.
I think the conversation about Ayuk is pretty short. It seems like inevitably he will end up in Washington at some point, and clearly they don't want to trade for him. So certainly Pittsburgh should have no interest in doing so. And Ayuk will go to Washington with his former Arizona State teammate in Jaden Daniels, and that'll be that. Even if Ayuk is released, even if Washington bowed out, even if Ayuk said I'll play for the minimum, I would not touch him. Too much toxicity. Pittsburgh's gone down that road. They've finally gotten past that by trading away, George Pickens and Deontay Johnson. I think have a pretty mature receiver room. Michael Pittman Jr. and Jeremy Bernard. I think DK Metcalf is mature, even though he can wear emotions on his sleeve and be a little hot-headed on the field. I think he's got a mature, workman-like, selfless approach, which is appreciated. Even though Pittsburgh could use some more receiver depth and options, and the room is not the best in the NFL. It's certainly better than what it was, and I just have no interest in Ayuk potentially disrupting all of that.
All right. That was about 5 minutes, right? It might be 5 minutes too much, but at least we have addressed that. I can't imagine us having to readdress that, Brandon Aiyuk, anytime soon.
By the way, just speaking of the guard market, I just saw a post here that Quentin Nelson is entering the last year of his extension, and so he certainly could be a extension candidate this offseason, this summer, which would probably make him the highest paid guard in the NFL or right on up there. I wouldn't expect McCormick to top that next year unless something crazy happens in all pro caliber year, but talking about more contracts, it'll continue to boost the guard market. Tippmann today, Nelson could be later this year.
Yeah. You can label it 1 year out or 365 365 days out roughly, but a lot is going to change and need to be tracked before we're talking about serious negotiations between the Steelers and Mason McCormick. And if you're a Steelers fan, you obviously want him to have his best season as a pro, and it will be interesting if indeed, as we've talked about, at least it seems right now the plan is for him to be at left guard, is the position he played predominantly in college, and thus alongside Fautano, who I think expectations right now should be starting left tackle for him.
Dave, last thing I have for you today, continuing my deconstructing the Steelers roster series. We talked about the long shots on Friday. These are now the outside looking in on the roster bubble, and this is the 11% to 40% chance. And again, this is to make the 53-man roster week one. Does not account for injury, does not account for practice squad, just accounts for player ability and depth chart standing and scheme fit and those kinds of things outlined in the article stickied on top of SteelersDepot.com. So here are the handful of players in that outside looking in category. Travis Homer, I put 40%. Mason Rudolph, 33%. Darnell Savage, 33%. Jack Driscoll, 25%. Kevin Jabody Jr., 25%. Dean Lowry, 20%. Ryan McCullum, 20%. And as I mentioned Friday, Jaheim Bell, the tight end, 15%. Any feelings, agreements, disagreements? Anyone else who should be added on this list? What are your thoughts?
I think looking at this going from top to bottom, I mean, Travis Homer, good special teams player, obviously break glass in case of emergency type running back. He is on a cheap contract at that. I have no problem, especially as we watch to see what happens maybe with Caleb Johnson and the whole Eli Heidenreich conversation there. Maybe I would have put that around slightly. I would have maybe take the slightly higher approach to that,
Really? I was
but
gonna ask if that was too high, if that was too optimistic.
yeah, not. I mean, I'd be splitting hairs here to say that should be 42%. So
Mhm.
generally, yeah, I think that's on point. Mason Rudolph, yeah, I don't have a problem with basically a 33% chance there. We'll learn more about these younger quarterbacks as training camp gets open and obviously into the preseason. At least in my head right now, and as I think I stated in my original 53-man roster prediction, I don't have Mason Rudolph surviving. I think it's going to be interesting to watch the quarterback situation around the league, especially once you get into training camp and the preseason. Potential injuries, even without injuries, could there be a landing spot where a team be willing to give up, I don't know, a 6th-round pick, maybe a 6 for a 7th swap or something like that come the start of after obviously the preseason ends and we get into that first round of cut downs, or the only round of cut downs, I guess. Overall, will the Steelers uh, quarterback depth chart stay healthy throughout that time? There's a lot of ifs related to that, but I don't have a problem with listing Mason Rudolph at 33% there. Darnell Savage. Once again, I think more potentially injury related more so than that. But I mean, you got a guy that's experienced there. You got a pedigree type guy. You got the fact that you'll be watching Spears Jennings and him trying to compete for a roster spot along with that. I guess overall 33% looks fine there. Jack Driscoll, 25%. I think it might come down with him once again. What's going to happen with Broderick Jones? We just had the conversation about is he going to be a PUP type guy? I think if Broderick Jones is not a PUP guy and looks like he can hang, looks like there's potential at least to let him hang around for another year, that would impact Driscoll. And then as we've had a kind of mini conversations there, will the Steelers keep 8 or 9 offensive linemen in total there?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think I mean, he's a veteran guy. I think he's the senior guy in the offensive line room right now, is he not?
I believe he is the elder statesman of that group.
All right, and obviously been around Pittsburgh dating back to last year on the practice squad and all like that. I think a lot of the things that we just noted there, and it goes without saying, keeping the rest of the offensive line healthy. But assuming everybody stays healthy, I think the biggest thing that bears watching with his 25% status would be the status of Broderick Jones in PUP, and is it 8 or 9 offensive linemen that are kept? Kevin Jobity, yeah, I like that at 25% as well too. I mean, this is a guy that we came out of the draft there wondering who's this Rubio guy that they drafted, and then lo and behold, we get into if you want to talk about probably the most notable of the small undrafted free agent class that the Steelers have this year. The deeper that you got into the profile on him, and I've gotten a little deeper into the tape there. He is the most intriguing and, in my opinion, the most likely of the undrafted free agents to make the roster this year. Will the Steelers keep 7? I think it'll be a good battle, at least on paper, between guys like Jobity, Rubio, and then the next guy on your list, Dean Lowry, who I would probably list a little bit lower than 20%. I'd be splitting hairs on him. I'd probably say more along the lines of 18 or 17%. Lowry coming off an injury, long in the tooth.
But he does have the connection with
Yeah,
McCarthy and Patrick Graham, and that's
sure.
really why he's back.
And then there's a conversation about how many in that room is kept. Will they keep 7 defensive linemen in totality there? Uh, so I think, and then Ryan McCollum 20%. Ideally, we'll have to watch the who is it, Greg Crippen, and uh, that'll be interesting to watch his progress as a rookie throughout the rest of this thing. I hate to say that I'm rooting against McCollum. I shouldn't root against any guy, but I would like to think that the Steelers could do better at the. You also have Hoffman, who has center experience in the NFL. That it feels like it's going to take a lot for Ryan McCollum to make the roster. That's why I would probably go slightly under 20% with him and his chances as we sit here today. And the last one that you have listed, uh, Jaheim Bell, the tight end, that 15% doesn't sound very high, but I would maybe even take it a little bit lower than that.
Yeah, Dave, just to sort of run down that list, Homer, like you said, the special teams aspect, really going to be an interesting battle between him, second-year Caleb Johnson, and rookie Eli Heidenreich. Could two of them make it? Possibly. Roster construction, as we've touched on a couple times, will be really interesting. Rudolph is really sort of tied to Will Howard. I think it's really Will Howard's job to lose. If he can shine and impress, then Howard almost certainly will be the number 2, and Rudolph probably on the outs. If Howard falters and struggles, then it becomes a much more interesting conversation. With Savage at safety, you got 3 safeties locked in Ramsey and Elliott and Brisker. You're going to keep at least one more. So you got Savage and Spears Jennings and Castro. Could you keep even 2 safeties? That's possible. Driscoll is, as you said, sort of dependent on Broderick Jones and his status. If Jones avoids IR or PUP, then really hard to see Driscoll make it. Jabody is interesting. Lowry, as I mentioned, just the Packers connection gives him a chance. McCollum has played well, just might be getting squeezed, and Bell in that jumbled up tight end mess. And so I'm sure people could disagree and say 33% or 40%, but if you're in the ballpark, I think then it's probably a fair discussion to sit there and say we're all kind of, rowing the same boat here.
Yeah, I think once again, yeah, any differences that I might have are minuscule and would be splitting hairs. I think overall you've done a good job with the percentages here. Will any one of these 3, 6, 8 guys do you think end up making it?
Will any of them? Oh, I hope so. Otherwise, I mean, my math is probably really bad. If none of these guys make it, you would assume that of this list of 8, that somebody is going to. I wonder who from last year did. I'll have to check my list from last year. But if I told you 3 of these guys made it, what top 3 do you think would be the 3?
I would probably go Homer, Jabody,
Mm,
and I think Mason
yeah.
would be the other one there. If betting of any of these 3 to make it, those I think would be my 3.
That might be my 3 as well, actually. So obviously, all these guys have a chance and a path, and injuries can, and we'll shake things up in a hurry. Last year's list, guys who made it from my outside the bubble list, and I'm just going off the top of my head here.
Were those also 11 to 40% chance range?
They were, yeah, the
Okay.
percents. It looks like there were more players last year. Logan Lee made it, right? Yeah, Lee made it. Waitman beat out Cameron Johnston. Did Castro make the initial 53 or the 53 week 1 roster? No, he was practice squad, right? Because he got poached by Tampa Bay during the season.
Mm.
And then Jeremiah Moon, was he hurt to begin the year? What was Moon? He did not make the 53 to begin the year. I forget exactly his
I
status.
think he went to IR kinda after, didn't he? Was that one of those, post I don't remember, but I don't think he was on the week 1
Right.
53.
So it looks like maybe 2 of them in Lee, in Waitman, and I believe that's the rest of the list for those curious. DJ Thomas Jones. It was Lee, Waitman, Castro, Dante Kent, who of course got hurt, Dylan Cook, our old friend Cordell Patterson, Jeremiah Moon, Max Sharping, and Aiden Williams, who was just cut the other day.
Alright.
All right, so we'll have the next one will be really interesting. It's the strictly on the bubble, like right there, about a coin flip chance to make it. So we'll have that conversation for Wednesday or Friday show. Anything else to discuss, Dave?
I thought there was something else that we wanted to hit on, wasn't there?
Oh, position battles. You wanted to
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
offensive position battles, and we'll probably save defense for sometime maybe later this week, another time. But offensive battles that might be up for grabs since we're talking roster odds right now. What do you think are the battles to watch?
Yeah, I think obviously we'll probably be dedicating some post and more time to this moving forward, but just kind of as we walk into the start of the long off season here, outside of the off season practices ending on the schedule wise there, and offense only, it feels like. I mean, this could be an A1, and an A2, or it could be a yes, or could it just be one position? I think the guard spot opposite Mason McCormick, whether that be right or left. Right now, it feels like it's going to be on the right side. Uh, it feels like that's number one in my book. Is it going to be Spencer Anderson? Will Brock Hoffman be given a chance? Obviously, you got Jennings Dunker in the mix there. Now, some will say, well, what's going? What you're automatically going with that? What's going to happen at right tackle? It's fair to talk about that as well too. That's why I kind of wonder if it just would it be right just to classify the right side of the offensive line in
Sure.
general, or is it would you put guard as the better battle over the tackle spot?
I think you can put them together. There's no clear, no one cemented that spot that has that spot their own day one in training camp, and so frankly, you might sit there and say that right guard might be a little more settled than right tackle, where I think Cook and Ihanacho could really be a nose for nose battle. I think Anderson's a pretty clear front runner to start training camp at right guard.
Okay. And I think who was it? Trey X was with Charlie Batch, and I think we wrote about some of the things that he said that he kind of views Anderson is potentially having a leg up at this point right now. He says, I think Spencer Anderson has the edge because he has the experience. He needs to get low. He needs to work on his pass protection and his footwork and his hand placement. Spencer Anderson, I think, has the edge, and I think he wins the battle when it comes to training camp. So, pretty strong statement. Uh, sitting here 6 weeks out from camp, that Essex really considers Spencer Anderson in the driver's seat, and at this point, kind of expects him to at least be the week one starter at right guard, or thus opposite Mason McCormick.
Well, reports were that Anderson was the first team right guard pretty much consistently throughout OTAs and spring work, and so I imagine once they report to training camp and I get my first offensive line notes, it'll be Anderson at right guard.
All right, and as far as the right tackle spot goes, or the tackle spot opposite Fautano, once again, all eyes will be on Broderick Jones, and then Dylan Cook, definitely going to be in the mix there, and the rookie and Ihanachor, all eyes will be on him through camp as well too from the start. So can Ihanachor do enough? Will Broderick Jones even be in the mix of the battle, and thus not starting on PUP? If he's not in the battle, then it feels like it becomes Cook versus Ihanachor, right?
It does. That'll be the scenario. What odds, if it is just Cook and Ihanacho, what percent chance do you give Ihanacho of winning that battle for week one against Atlanta to stick with our odds and percentage theme?
I don't know. That 33% jumps in my head right away.
For Ihanacho. So Cook as the clear favorite, you're saying?
I would think so, at least out of the chute. Now,
Okay.
would Cook potentially be on a short leash? And it all depends. I mean, you got to obviously the book on Ihanacho coming out of college is just the rawness overall, right? And
Publicly, but Mike McCarthy has
yeah,
once called him plug and play. So
right.
it all matters what the team's perception is.
And look, if it's a close battle, would you rather go with the younger pedigree guy?
Well, I think naturally just lend itself to the guy that you just drafted first round by the new coaching staff over the old regime players, so to speak, for lack of a better phrasing, Dylan Cook. So I would put the odds of Ihanacho much higher than 33%. It's still going to be
Okay.
a battle. Ihanacho still has much to prove and talked a lot about working the upper half of his body, his hand placement, his punch, just overall technique. But I would give him, 55% chance to pick a
Okay.
number.
Interesting. All right. I wonder how many people would be listening to this and look, uh, uh, hope springs eternal when it comes to the draft class. And why do you draft a guy in the first round if you can't get him in the lineup right away? I look, I'm not, I think there's a plausibility, obviously, that Iheanacho could be the week one
Sure.
guy, but you know. We'll learn a lot more about him once training camp and the preseason gets underway. So in conclusion, would you, even though you got the backup quarterback situation going on and the battles there between Mason and Will Howard, and how important obviously the position is at quarterback, would you still deem the more intrigue? What is the single one most intriguing? Would it be the right side of the offensive line, or would it be the backup quarterback situation that is the single most intriguing battle?
Well, quarterback always gets the intrigue because it's quarterback, and especially when it's a young quarterback like Howard that's been talked up throughout the offseason, and start it'll start to be put up and shut up time this summer, even though we should expect Howard to have some ups and downs and just natural for any young player, especially a quarterback. We don't want to react to the moment. I'm sure the internet will be very calm to everything Will Howard does this summer. But I think in terms of what really matters for Pittsburgh for the 2026 season, it's the right side of the offensive line, in particular the right tackle spot. I think is the most intriguing thing in terms of how the season will be shaped. If you're still facing so many good pass rushers in the NFL, it's a talented offensive line. The work that James Campen and Jari Evans can do will be interesting. So I think the right tackle spot is going to be the most really truly intriguing part from a what matters for the here and now standpoint.
All right. Let's see. Tight end, you're too deep there, obviously, at the top in Freiermuth and Darnell Washington. The left side, or at least the side that Fautanu and McCormick is on, seems set there. You're obviously set at center. Starting quarterback is Aaron Rodgers. You got the top two running backs in Dowdle and Jalen Warren. I mean, what is there left to talk about on the offensive side of the football there?
Well, there's still some good battles, I think, even if they're a little less intriguing.
Depth.
Quarterback, we've talked about. Yeah, depth, the third tight end spot. Will it be Nowakowski doing fullback and tight end duties? Will it be somebody else in that mix, whether that's Robert Tunyon, J.J. Galbraith, Lake McCree, Jaheim Bell, the names we mentioned before. Receiver, let's talk about that. What battles could there be there? Brentwood Wilson still has to earn his spot. Ben Skoranek will be still fighting the group. Could a Max Herman, an A.T. Perry, somebody else, Cole Burgess, emerge and be this year's Camp Darling? There's still probably something to be said there about the 4 and 5 spots. And are you going to keep 6 receivers? I don't know what McCarthy's track record exactly is there in terms of keeping 6, but that's still a pretty common thing to do. I think Pittsburgh kept 6 to begin last year, even though they had all the tight ends under Arthur Smith. And so there is a 6. Who's it going to be? Could it be an outsider that they're competing against too? I think receiver is going to be interesting to watch.
Let's see. Rolling back to the week 1 game against the Jets last year. Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, DK Metcalf, Ben Skoranek,
Scotty Miller.
Scotty, where's Scotty on here? What number was he? Oh, 13. Yeah. Scotty Miller was on there. So how many is that?
Was there not a 6th?
What did I say? Austin, Wilson, Metcalf, Scotty Miller, Skoranek. Was that it?
You told me you're looking at the roster. I don't know.
I'm trying to go because it's
the initial 53 was 5 with Metcalf, Austin, Wilson, Skoranek, and Miller. So I misremembered. It was only 5 there to begin.
Okay. And
but
running
could
backs,
be a 6.
Running backs, they kept Warren, Gainwell, Caleb Johnson, and I think that was it in the running back room.
Yeah, so it had been 5 the last couple of years in 2024 and 2025, at least the initial 53 according to our past articles, but certainly could be 6 under a Mike McCarthy-based scheme and system that's going to rely more on receivers. And if it is 6, then that's really wide open, but even the 4 and 5 spots, I certainly will talk odds whenever the time comes, but I would not put Roman Wilson or Ben Skoranek at 100% or even anywhere all that close to 100%.
All right. Well, that'll be a topic of conversation once you release the next article. I imagine those two guys would be right there on the bubble then, right?
Well, we'll see because
All right.
there's the bubble, there's the inside the bubble. So those with clearly better than 50%, but short of being locks. There's the near locks, so the guys that are almost guaranteed to make it, but not quite, and then the actual locks of the world at 100%. Just their spot is written truly in pen. So other battles, running back, we mentioned that with Homer and Heidenreich and Caleb
Taylor.
Johnson, and even Lou Nichols was a summer darling last year. He had some really good preseason reps, had a couple of long runs. He got some kick return work. He got a little taste of the NFL last year. So, Lou Nichols, I imagine, will get a chance to show something late in some preseason action this year, too.
I can guarantee you in my 90 and 30, he's going to be more slanted towards the practice squad
Sure.
and his chances there for obvious reasons.
Right, for sure. But just to kind of mention the group and see who's all competing, and you never know how a summer is going to go. And injuries certainly could impact things should they arise at the running back position. So that'll be there's a lot of battles. So basically, every position group there's a battle to watch. No group is truly settled in.
All right. Let's see. I think we got to that topic. Is there anything else out there that we need to talk about before we get to some listener emails here?
No, I think that covers it well. So let's get to some emails and close out today's show.
All right, let me sort them out real quick here. I think we got a couple worth going over here. The first one that I'm seeing in here is from Todd Gentzler, who doesn't make the cut. For several years now on this podcast, there have been discussions about the Steelers simply needing to draft better. Now, since Khan has taken over, the Steelers have been signing many players picked whilst looking at the offensive line, all of whom seem to be excelling. Is there anyone that the Steelers won't be able to re-sign? Oh, I think we kind of already touch on this. I don't know why he's rebumped this up. He says at this point, Fautano, Frazier, Anderson, and even Cook have a chance to get signed. That is a great problem to have. Who do they let go to free agency? Clearly, the priority is Fautano and Frazier. All right, Todd. Once again, let's revisit this once again. From where we sit right now, McCormick and Zach Frazier are the odds-on favorites to be extension candidates that we're talking about a year from now, because both those guys were not first-round draft picks, and those guys will be entering their fourth and final season of their contract next offseason there. The whole talk about Fautano, I think it's important to remember that if the Steelers exercise the fifth-year option on Fautano by the start of whenever the deadline is next year, which is going to be probably in early May, then that obviously makes his final contract year 2027. And then barring the team going off script when it comes to 2 years out and everything related to that, on the surface it feels like, and obviously a lot of things can change in 365 days, I have a feeling that we're not going to be talking about a Fautano extension a year from now. And if we are, it'll just be more along the dialogue of, will the Steelers break some precedent, get out in front of this? Let's say Fautano just has an absolutely fantastic 2026 season. I mean, obviously that's going to make the decision a lot easier to pick up the fifth-year option, but as we've seen since the fifth-year option has come into play, contracts for those guys don't haven't happened until that player was actually entering the exercised fifth-year option year on his contract. Now, as far as the other guys that you mentioned in here of Anderson and Dylan Cook, even look, Alex has made sure to put out there that could Anderson be a fringe guy that, after all said and done, maybe signs a 2-year extension more on the cheaper side? To me, if Yeah, if I'm Anderson, there's not a lucrative enough deal out there, I might want to see what free agency possibly holds for me, especially if I'm looking like I'm going to be the week one starter, at least out of the chute. There, I think a lot would have to happen if we're talking about a Dylan Cook extension. Although, I in the same boat kind of as Anderson, he has played some ball. There is at least some value there. I don't think we're going to be talking about a summer recap here of Boswell, Herbig, Washington, Porter, Benton, uh, Anderson, and Cook all getting extended this offseason. That would be quite epic if that happened. I understand wanting to at least throw Anderson and Cook maybe into some slight plausibility column here. But as I sit here right now, I will be surprised if Anderson and Cook get extended. And then once again, listing Fautano in here, I think is a little bit of a stretch because of the fact that you're hoping he plays well enough that he makes the fifth year option decision easy, and then thus the extension off season for him would happen after the 2026 season, or no, after the 2027 season.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about there may not have to be truly an odd man out. I mean, obviously, maybe not all these guys get re-signed for just guys want to start somewhere else, and from a roster construction standpoint, but from a financial standpoint, I think Pittsburgh can make a lot of this work when you're likely paying a quarterback peanuts next year. Really, really not even just paying a quarterback, but your whole quarterback room will be very little money spent, you would imagine, next year. And if you draft a first-round quarterback, you'll have a large contract, but a small, first-year cap charge on that. So that really allows you to be flexible spending elsewhere, and that's what Pittsburgh has already done by loading up a tight end and outside linebacker in places that teams usually can't double and triple up on.
Now look, I suppose we should go into the actual status of restricted versus let's see here. After the 2020, let's see, next off season, who on this list? Obviously, Brock Hoffman will be an unrestricted free agent. Let me sort this out here of who's going to be what when it comes to some of these guys.
Peyton Wilson will be a notable, or excuse me, not
Well,
Peyton Wilson,
I'm
Patrick
talking.
Queen.
I'm talking about offensive lineman being how
Oh, I'm
he's
sorry. I'm sorry.
talking about
Okay.
it. Spencer Anderson will be an unrestricted free agent after this season. Where's is Dylan? Dylan Cook will be a restricted free agent after this season. That's another reason to think that Dylan Cook's not going to get an extension this the offseason that we're in right now. If Dylan Cook plays well enough, and let's say he has to end up playing 8 or 9 games, plays well, maybe he warrants a as high as a second round tender on that. But I would be shocked if Dylan Cook signs an extension this offseason. I'll be close to not as shocked, but still shocked if Spencer Anderson signs an extension this offseason. Now, I guess if you want to start diving deeper into this, what about after the 2026 season and before free agency starts? Could Spencer Anderson be a guy that you're trying to potentially re-sign, as a depth guy? Depending on how he plays, depending on the rest of how the roster looks, depending on, are you going to for sure lose Brock Hoffman? I think the Spencer Anderson talk is a talk that we are going to potentially be having maybe after the 2026 season.
Yeah, but if he starts and plays reasonably well, there will likely be a free agent market for him to, at the very least, go strongly compete for a job, if not have a job outright. He's going to be how old next year? Not that old. In his mid-20s, right? And, those guys with some experience, those guys get paid a ton on the open market. It'll be, see, he just turned 26. He'll be 26 come free agency next March. And so that's a guy that could get a pretty nice payday if he starts, especially if he starts the entire season and plays well. But even if he's starting half the season and has some decent tape, the O-line tax and free agency is very real.
All right, let's Richard Jameson says has a question about Broderick Jones. Do you think it would be a good idea for the Steelers to sign Broderick Jones to a 2-year extension at typical backup tackle money? Look, we don't we're still having conversations of wondering if Broderick Jones is even going to avoid the PUP list come the start of training camp right now. And why if Broderick Jones feels like he can even come back and thinks that he's going to play and a potential maybe even win the right tackle job at least out of training camp this year, going that far with things, why would he with the potential of him now being an unrestricted free agent, why would he kind of take backup tackle money for, it's easy to look at this at the Steelers side. We'll just lock this guy up on a backup money for 2 years, but you also got to take the players side of this and look at it as well too. So do I think anything's going to happen there on the heels of this team obviously not picking up his fifth-year option this past summer? No, I think the clear thing right now is, let's see if Broderick Jones can even be healthy enough to play in 2026, and if he does, then we'll just have to address it after the season and see what maybe potentially can be done from keeping him from hitting unrestricted free agent. It would be quite a phenomenal story, I think, if you had a former first round draft pick that you didn't exercise the 5th-year option on, that you turned around and signed to, let's say, a 2-year contract in that same offseason there. That would be quite a development, at least in my eyes. So, you know, he asked if it's a good idea. I mean, nothing prevents the team from offering something. I don't think you're going to see anything happen there with Broderick Jones.
Yeah, I agree. Let it play out. Really no incentive for the player to lock himself down on a discount anyway. I don't think the health situation is murky. Even a chance as you outlined where his contract could toll next year. I just, nope, no contract talks right now.
All right, one last one from Brett Nile here. I was listening to your podcast discussion about roster percentages, and you made the comment about Logan Lee and whether his ability to long snap might help him make the roster as a defensive lineman. That brought me to the question, assuming Logan Lee does not win a job, establish himself as a part of the defensive line rotation this year, is it possible that the team or someone else could go to him and suggest he convert to a long snapper? You see this in baseball where prospects will start out at something, get moved to a different position. Obviously, it's too late for this year, but after the season, with the full off season, could a change like that be possible? Now, this is a big if, he says, but if he were able to long snap, he would actually be quite athletic for the position, might even be special teams plus with an ability to cover and tackle. If he doesn't make the defensive line rotation this year, that may be his best option to carve out an NFL career. I did not have Logan Lee's future as a long snapper beyond 2026 as a question that we would get not only on today's podcast or at any point this all season on the podcast. I don't even know what to think about all this. I mean, that if he can't make it as a defensive lineman, look, people just think go out there and long snap. I think it's great that Logan Lee has the ability to function as a potential emergency long snap guy, but it's a lot more intricate other uh, than that. I mean, could the guy spend a whole off season maybe at one of those long snapping schools and refine himself and help his cause that way? I suppose, but I think at best, especially if you have not snapped in an NFL game up until that point, on a regular basis, I think you'd be looking at best a being a roster pusher kind of guy. I I'm not going to give a lot of thought about this. I guess I see where he's coming from here, but Logan
hmm
Lee's main concern right now is trying to make this roster as a defensive lineman. Beyond that, I mean, I don't know. I would think that he would, even if he doesn't make this team, he would think that he could still maybe develop to be a practice squad or a potential backup on another team as a defensive lineman.
It's a fun question. I appreciate it here for a sleepy Monday. I don't think that'd be the path. I get the question. I'm not even sure Lee would be really more athletic than other long snappers. I mean, Kuntz was an outside linebacker and a pretty good one at Duquesne. So he's probably about the same athleticism. Lee's a big defensive lineman. He'd be bigger, and having the size there would be nice at the position. That would be something that would set him apart from other long snappers who are more in that tight end linebacker kind of mold and build. But I mean, to be a long snapper, you can't just be good. You got to be perfect. One bad snap cost you your job, and so the precision and so small margin of error required for the position says that you got to be really good. And these are guys that have been long snapping, most of them for a long, long time, and they're just so good at their craft that trying to catch up, you're gonna be behind that eight ball. I think the big issue that they would be there for Lee is that just there aren't many long snapping jobs. There's 32 of them. Some teams occasion. I mean, in camp, if you carry two, Pittsburgh only has the one right now. I mean, maybe there are 45 long snappers on rosters right now. Some teams carrying two, some teams carrying just one during the season. Maybe teams will carry an extra long snapper in case. So maybe there's 35 on rosters across the NFL. It's not many. And so defensive linemen, you got how many defensive linemen are on rosters right now, Dave? Probably 300 plus. So just do the math on that. You got 300 defensive linemen on rosters right now, and you got 40 long
Practice
snappers.
squad, yeah.
Right. I'm saying you just even right now,
Right.
during the season, there'll be fewer, but the still overwhelmingly more defensive linemen. And just so from an odds standpoint, you probably want to stick defensive linemen, but you want to sit there and tell teams, I can also play long snapper if you need me in a pinch, and that
Right.
does give value. To me, not enough to make the roster, but to be on a practice squad or to hang around or be in a camp and stuff like that. That all can help. And the fact that Lee did it in that game last year certainly is real tangible value and tape that could be sent out to teams. And so it's better to have that as kind of a little party trick as opposed to being your claim to fame.
I like how you put that, and I agree. It's nice to have on your resume that, hey, by the way, should you
Mhm.
get into a situation in a game and I'm active and the long snapper goes down, I could probably get us out of the game,
Right.
unlike James Harrison.
All right. The question is, if Lee does not make it, who is Pittsburgh's backup long snapper? I believe Cole Holcomb has worked on that a bit before. I think a little bit in Pittsburgh. I think also before in Washington. That'd be a candidate. I'm not sure if anybody else and what their backgrounds entail. I think Lee did some snapping in high school, which is where it all started for him. But if Holcomb does make the roster, he may be the plan B.
All right, quite an interesting question to wrap things up with. We have the live stream going on tonight, so 7 o'clock Eastern time in the PM. Alex Kozora's YouTube channel. Everybody that normally attends those should know the program when it comes out. What do you imagine? What's going to be probably some of the more prominent things you think will be asked tonight? Because it's been like
Just
3 weeks since. Has it been 3 weeks since we had one of these?
no, we did it 2 weeks ago.
Oh, we did do
I
it two
think.
weeks ago. Okay.
Yeah. We missed Memorial Day. We did it the weekend after
Oh,
Memorial Day. Yeah, probably just training camp stuff. I mean, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. You never know what you might get in there. Also, by the way, we have episode 2, season 2, Steelers Depot Jeopardy up on the site. Also, my YouTube channel, where for the first time I was a contestant and not a host, and so you can see how well I did and if I played my part well enough.
all right. Make sure to check that out if you get some time today as well. So, all right. With that, we'll wrap up this Monday show on June the 15th here. As usual, if you want to follow along on Twitter at Steelers Depot, follow Alex at Alex_Kozora, follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button and follow the directions that way. I do not believe, at least right now, I'm going to be part of I'll be part of the Wednesday show. I think Friday, I'm probably not going to be on the show Friday. So Alex might have Ross or Joe or both or Josh. I don't know. One of those guys sit in for me there. But I will be back for the Wednesday show, and we'll see if what we have to talk about come that time there. And once again, we got the live stream tonight on Alex Kozora's YouTube channel. Hope to see a lot of people partake in that once again. So until next time, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.